Paul, we got Drew on the line. What do you want to ask him?
What are some things I can do to get better deals?
A lot of times when people are starting out, they try to put up a facade or like puff like I'm like bigger than I am. Do the opposite of that. Just tell them exactly what you're doing. I bought a rental house and I'm trying to move to this type of property. And if they ask, where's your debt coming from or equity, like just tell them the real answer.
Hey, I'm Brian Briscoe, host of the Diary of an Apartment Investor podcast. And this podcast is different from everything else out there. I bring together new and inspiring investors on each and every episode and let the aspiring investors ask the questions that they need answered. And if you're an aspiring investor yourself, you probably have the same questions. So before you get to this episode that we have prepared for you, make sure you hit the subscribe button and that little notification bell to make sure you get notified every time we post a new episode. And now, enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Diary of an Apartment Investor podcast. I'm your host, Brian Briscoe with Streamline Capital. Very excited for today's show. It's another one of our Ask the Expert episodes. We got two amazing people on the line with us today. We got Drew Breneman and Paul Gomez. So guys, welcome to the show today.
Thanks for having me.
Good afternoon.
Thanks a lot, guys. So Drew, you're up first. You're going to be in the hot seat today. So let's talk a little bit about you. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, and appreciate having me on the podcast, Brian. I think this is a cool format. I listened to, maybe at least a half dozen episodes. It's been, it's an interesting concept, and so I'm happy to be a part of it. But yeah, really got started young, investing in real estate, something I just sort of, I would say fell into, but I mean, I put myself there. But I started an internet business when I was in high school, reselling items in video games people were playing at the time. So this is back in like 2002, 2003. So Diablo 2 and World of Warcraft and those kind of games. Yeah. But the important thing is you could, today you could start a similar kind of business, flipping items on Amazon. But the main thing was that I accumulated some money when I was in high school, and instead of going and spending it, like probably most folks would, like my parents were both teachers. So there was a lot of talk about savings, and then also invested in mutual funds and just sort of more, common investments. So I sort of just followed what they had talked about, and I saved all the money I made. I didn't waste any of it. And then I started looking at what I could invest in and tried mutual funds, tried stocks. But where the light bulb really went off for me on what I should be doing was I was reading a book by Gary Eldred called Investing in Real Estate. It's a great book for complete beginners where I didn't know anything. And he's going from how to invest and value properties to how to manage them. But where the light bulb really went off for me was he was giving an example of the appreciation, that component of the return. So obviously you have cash flow and you pay the loan down, you get tax breaks, but then you also get appreciation. And his example was you put 10% down on a property. This is in 2002. So it's like, they've always gone up 3%, like the last million years. It's never been a housing correction pretty much at that point. If you put 10% down on this duplex and it goes up 3% in that year, that's a 30% return on your equity. Yeah. So now that I've done I've done a bit of real estate, I know it's not that simple where they don't just always go up 3% a year, but sometimes they go up more, sometimes they go down. Like it's not as simple as that. But
in a 10% down payment, I haven't seen one of those since 2007. So yeah,
right. That's the other part of it. Where, if you're doing a commercial property or multifamily deal, I mean, expect to put down, 25 to 50% in today's times, so that's, like I was saying, oversimplified. But what was nice about it being simple was that, as a 16, 17-year-old reading it, like I understood it, and sort of the light bulb went off for me. And I grew up in the Milwaukee area, and I was going to go to college at UW-Madison. So I decided, all right, I'm going to live in the dorms freshman year like you're required to. And then I'm going to buy a rental property while I'm there. And I'm going to live in it my sophomore year and rent out one of the units, and then the bedrooms in the unit I'll live in. And I did that. So got a realtor, bought my first deal when I was 19, bought a second one that year as well. And then bought about $2 million of property total while I was in college.
Wow.
And at that point, I had invested all my money, and I never really thought about raising capital or anything. So what made sense to me was to go get a job and work at a place where I could learn. So I was thinking, like, how could I make use of this sort of time? And also I graduated in December 2007. So I could see sort of the writing on the wall, like this isn't like such a great time, but it would be a great time to learn and then, continue to build up my net worth. So that's what I did. I started out I interned at a industrial and office developer, and then worked full-time at a multifamily developer, and then later at a retail developer. But sort of where I had like a career defining break, let's call it, it was when I was working at the multifamily developer. Now this is up in Minnesota.
Yeah.
And one of the interns there, I told him, just like I tell everybody, what I was up to. And he was like, why don't we go talk to my dad? Let's go think about, we could all buy something together. He has money to invest and we could do the work. So I don't like to waste time. I met with them, I think literally the next day, and I had printed out deals and said, here's what we could be doing. And here's what I've done so far. Here's the 2 deals I've sold. Here's what happened on those. Here's the 2 I own right now. And he really, the dad really liked the shopping center that I had brought to that meeting. Long story short, we ended up buying that shopping center that I had printed out. And over the last, that was in 2008. We closed on that in 2009, that first deal. And then from 2009 to 2019, the 3 of us bought $100 million of property together.
Wow.
Now,
was that your friend's dad funding most of it, or did you guys syndicate, or how did that work out?
All the equity came from my coworker's dad. We did not charge any fees. We just took a share of the profits. We also did not invest any money in those deals. So I know that's like a unique structure, obviously, like no fees and then no co-invest, but that worked for us. We were also signing on the loans, and if there were any losses, we were committing to pay those or to fund those as well. That structure worked for us. And I mean, if anyone else is in a similar boat, like that's a lot simpler way to start, obviously. And then we could have scaled that. Like a lot of people from there, what they'll do is then that might be sort of their GP capital, and then they'll start to raise outside money. Neither of my partners wanted to do that. They wanted just to keep it sort of, this is going well, and let's just focus on reinvesting what we have. And so I think, like all told, the dad, he invested less than $10 million. Just pointing that out, because to get to 100 million, you would need to, like a lot of it was we bought the property, we'd raise the income of it a lot, then we'd do a cash out refinance, pull it all for equity. I think on 13 deals that we did that on, we refinanced out over 100% on average of our equity on average about a year. So we did.
You guys 13. Were doing the bigger pockets BRRRR method on apartments, essentially.
Yeah. And, in a lot of those deals didn't even require renovations. So if you're familiar with the whole BRRRR abbreviation, but a lot of that was, we were buying from developers or from people who acquired the loan note and then foreclosed on the property. And then we'd pick it up and take it like that final, mile or whatever with the property, the last, 20% of value we could, push up. So that was our strategy. And then actually in 2019, the son passed away. He was younger than me. He was a year and a half younger than me. Wow. And he didn't have any issues or anything that we all knew about. It was just, he just passed away in his sleep. And that like kind of threw my whole like career kind of, through the deck up in the air, like, what are we going to do now type thing. But I still own pretty much all the deals with the dad. We've sold some deals and then did 1031 exchanges into larger deals, but we're not growing that like how we used to. And then, so I started looking at like, where can I pick up other investors? And I had one person with kind of a similar scenario where he had a wealthy father-in-law, but I didn't really push that because I was already sort of busy with this partnership. And so I got that going. And then we were able to buy deals quicker and larger deals where from 2019 to 2021, we bought another $100 million of property, just the 3 of us, same business structure. I know this is like, people probably listening are like, wow, this is like rare. How did you find these like 2 families? But it's like, well, I literally told this thing like 1,000 times or whatever, and 2 times it worked out. So like, there's the tip maybe in there is like, you just keep saying your story, and then that something like that can happen. And I was taking the action, like the first meeting, like I had already done deals. It wasn't just like an idea. And then, in 2021, 2022, I was really looking at the business and what I wanted to do. And, I had only lived in the Midwest my whole life. Only all my deals were in the Midwest. Sort of around 2012, when we look at like the data on rent growth and also price appreciation, early in my career, let's say from 2000 to 2010, like the gateway markets were always the best for everything. Like you go open up the Marcus and Millichap report for like top markets. And for quite a while, like in the 2000s decade, it was just which one will be number one, San Francisco or New York. It was just flip-flopped. But then about, coming out of the GFC, now the Sun Belt is exploding, and all the highest rent growth, job growth, multifamily price appreciation, it's all in the Sun Belt. Carolinas, the mountain states. And so, it's not in California or the Northeast anymore. the Midwest having a good run right now, but it's more of like playing catch up, if in my opinion. But so I figured we need to reshift this business and focus on the Sun Belt. So the last 5 deals I bought have been value add deals in Phoenix. 3 months ago, I moved to Austin, Texas, from Chicago, where I had been living for 10 years. And Dallas and Austin are going to be the next markets for us.
Nice.
So that's sort of bring it current day.
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned something. I mean, it is kind of lucky, I guess, and I'll explain that term in a second. Lucky that you found, your partner's dad. But the other side that you mentioned that I made a mental note of is you went and saw him the same night. I mean, how many people give you tips like that? Like, oh, hey, my dad's interested in stuff like that. I mean, I was just thinking about how many times have I heard things like that and never followed through. So I think there's 2 things there. Number one, you were telling everybody, but number 2, when you got tips, when people told you stuff like that, legit tips, you were following through, which I think a lot of people probably don't. So yeah, you make your own luck.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, Brian was his name, the son, and he majored in real estate also, like I did at UW-Madison. And, however many, you meet hundreds of people there. And we both worked at the same company where there's a lot of people doing these large deals. But yeah, I was the one who took advantage of it. And, it's, so yeah, you're definitely right. And then too, yeah, it's funny too, if I say my story, like in a minute and they're like, oh, that's really lucky you already knew that guy. And it's like, no, I didn't know him. Like he was like my coworker. And we all put it together.
Yeah. Awesome. So let's talk about one of these deals a little more detail. So pick your favorite, pick one and let's talk a little bit about it.
So yeah, so far I've done about 40 deals and I think I own about 30 now. So call it sold 10 or so. Average IRR is 25%. Usually we're longer term holders. Like those are all on average 5-year holds, but a lot of stuff we've owned for 10 years now. So that's a nice part of how we own it too, where we're not a million investors in one deal and we can kind of just have a conversation about it. Yeah. But yeah, I think I've done quite a few loan assumptions. So I think that's worth talking about because it's timely. So the largest deal I've done it's an apartment building called Madison Throop, 1247 West Madison Street in Chicago, Illinois. We bought it for $33 million in October 2020. And really like that deal, it was just how you want to buy it, where it was off market. But these larger deals, they're usually not off market from, let's say, sending out like mailers or cold calls or anything. Like most people are, I'd say 90% or more of the deals that sell, even if they're off market, there's still a broker attached to it. So it was a building built in 2015. The original developer still owned it. And they reached out to a broker they use and said like, hey, who do you know who could sell this? They sent it to us. They knew we could do these loan assumptions as a Fannie Mae conventional loan. So I also, let's like make the brokers know, like, here's what I'm up to and the type of loans we do. So they thought of us and they sent it our way. I think they wanted 40 million. And I was like, I'm not really anywhere close. I'd probably be like around 32, 33 million. But just doing like a quick pre-screen and they were like, come check it out. Let's just have a look. And we ended up putting a deal together. I think the exact price was 32.8 million, but just was rounding. And we had to assume they're, like about a $24 million loan on it. And so that was, middle of COVID doing it. But, just how you want to buy deals, there's, no best and final call for offers. We heard about a deal. This is not a thing with speed, I guess, too. We heard about it on let's say a Tuesday. You got to give 48 hours notice in Chicago. We saw it on a Thursday and then we made our offer on Thursday.
Nice. Yeah.
Signed LOI Friday.
Yeah. Speed definitely helps. And there are 2 things in there. There's something else you said in there as well. Hold on. It just escaped me, but you said something. You
probably making brokers known for stuff.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I was just saying that's basically the only other thing I said. So that's why I was like, it's probably that one.
Yeah, it had to be that one. So, and that's something that I've been trying to do very recently with a lot of our brokers. I hired somebody to do acquisitions. And, something I've told them a couple of times is, always tell the brokers, if they send you something that's not in your buyback box, just remind them what your buy box is today, and hey, here are the types of deals we're looking for. We're going to pass on this one because it's too big, too small, too square, too round, or too whatever. And remind them what your buy box is. And that way, when they get something in your buy box, they're thinking of you. And that's huge right there. So
yeah, that's great advice. And I think some people, when they get sent a deal that's a little bit outside of their buy box, they'll still underwrite it and try to give to do what you're saying, to give the broker feedback. But then if it's not in your buy box, I'd recommend don't even waste your time underwriting it. Just spend the time to tell the broker what you're looking for. And then then that kind of reinforces, like, don't just send them any deal. Cause also if you underwrite it and then give pricing feedback, it's like, well, yeah, Brian says his buy box is this, but if I send him this deal outside of it, still tell me a price, maybe buy it. So I'll still get it to him. So yeah, that'd be the other thing that I recommend is, like, try to not even spend any time on the deals that aren't in your buy box.
I would say there's one exception to that, and that's if you still need practice underwriting, when you're brand new. But yeah, other than that, I completely agree. First thing that we do when we underwrite, you look at something, is this in our buy box? Check yes or no. All right. If the answer is no, we go straight to that email to the broker. Hey, thanks a lot. We're looking for something a little bigger, a little rounder, a little, so anyway, cool. So let's talk a little bit about motivation and what I call big burning why. So what's your why?
Yeah. So I guess to kind of lay the groundwork a little bit, like my parents were both teachers. I think I'd mentioned that. So we had all summer off and went on vacation sometimes for more than a month. Like I've been camping in like most of the states out west for months. And so so that's how I grew up. So then you hear about these business jobs where it's like you get 2 or 3 weeks PTO and you're working long hours. They work from 7 to 3 being teachers, or to 2:30, so you're used to being able to do stuff during the week too, where if you're working a 9 to 5, can't really do much. So really is all around flexibility, I'd say. So like a lot of people, they say like, oh, I want passive income. I really wanted just to be able to control my time. Number one. And then two, I did read this. I think it was in one of the Robert Kiyosaki books, and it made so much sense to me, where it was around what's more financially secure. Somebody who has, let's say, a portfolio of properties that are all making money, or stocks, or it could be other investments than just real estate, but that's the one that we all chose. Or someone who's just working a W-2 job and at any point potentially could be fired and then their income shut off completely. Yeah. So security and flexibility.
There is a lot more security when you have multiple streams of income. So that's a fact. Love it. But all right, last question before we bring Paul on, and that's what's next for you?
So just all in on the Sun Belt. And then we have started taking on passive investors that are not these folks that are investing millions in a deal, but I'd have over that same time where I was kind of explaining my career arc, where people that already knew, or sometimes like a broker would refer someone like, hey, here's a buyer, but he, just wants to invest like $100,000. I couldn't take those folks on. We weren't set up to do it. Like I was the asset manager and the acquisitions department, and we didn't have any investor reporting really, because both those investors, their daughters actually at some point started both working for us doing the accounting. So like they needed any info, they just could come to me or their daughter or, their son-in-law. So really just taking on just regular, passive investors, and then just all in on multifamily Sunbelt, Phoenix, Dallas, Austin.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, here we go. Switching gears slightly. Let's bring Paul on, introduce Paul. So welcome to the show.
Hey, how's it going, Brian?
Doing really well. How you doing?
I'm doing great.
Awesome. How's the weather in Dallas today?
It's so hot. It just makes you insta sweat when you walk outside. So it's just right now we're just in survival mode, heat of summer kind of thing.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, here I think we had our third 80-degree day of the year. I'm in Idaho. So, some days, I know. When I was in Dallas last, actually saw you when I was there, but I was in the Uber from the airport to the hotel. And I remember getting into the car and thinking, man, it's warm in here. And then really thinking about that statement, it's like, oh my goodness, I'm somewhere warm. And I was like, just like super happy on the inside. But anyway, aside from that, Paul, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a native Texan. Grew up in San Antonio, Texas, all the way up and through high school. Went to school in Lubbock, Texas, Texas Tech. Got my master's in electrical engineering in 2014. Then moved over here to Dallas. I got my first double E job here right out of college. My girlfriend at the time happened to be working here as well, and actually worked out, ended up marrying her. We've lived in Dallas about 9 years now, have 2 little ones. My foray into real estate is like I grew up in a single parent household, and My mom is a little bit, old school. In the Rich Dad Poor Dad book, she is probably the poor dad, but always had good advice to give me. She always made sure to teach me about personal finance and make sure, I read those books and how to protect your assets, or at least how to invest for your future. So I think that's kind of where my understanding and passion for real estate comes from. I acquired my first rental property in the outskirts town here outside of Dallas in 2019. Got that lease to Section 8. So I've been learning a lot about that. And how I ended up in multifamily is had to evict a tenant last year and drop a whole lot of cash to get that place up and running again. And I just knew that, I didn't want to play the long game on single family. It was just going to take too long. And it required too much capital and just too much attention. So I shifted into multifamily, and I've just been learning as much as I could at the start of this year.
Nice. How's that journey been so far? I mean, the first part, the learning part, it's almost like you're drinking from a fire hose.
Yeah, it is actually. The biggest thing that I'm kind of working on right now is just the soft skills of networking, because, double E's, we don't talk that much. We're engineers, we're siloed, everyone's got their own thing going on. So I tend to lean more introverted, extrovert. So, I had to come out of my shell a little bit and just practice that skill and, try to make an influence on the people that I meet that are locals. So
nice. Well, awesome. So let's talk a little about this. I mean, you kind of briefly mentioned some of the things that are probably going to come out here, but let's talk about your why. What's your big burning why?
Yeah, the first part to my big burning why is I want to be able to mentor kids, who are probably in less fortunate situation, maybe Hispanic kids from back home, because, where I come from, there aren't a lot of mentors around, especially like big money mentors, people who understand business, people who understand real estate. And so I think it's important. Like, I want to make sure that I'm able to give back, but also kind of share my knowledge in real estate. So, I kind of see it as I would like to cross that chasm first and learn and grow and get my own experience and such, so that I can be that person for someone else. Yeah. So that's a big part of my why. The second part is, I got my young family, and, everything kind of shifted as soon as I had my boy. So for me, it's about having the flexibility. Like Drew said, I want to be able to travel with them. I don't want to have to worry about where we live, where we call home. If I can live on a beach in Hawaii and still do multifamily or something like that, sounds pretty awesome to me. So It's just that financial freedom and that flexibility.
Yeah. You mentioned, your mom being more aligned with the poor dad. I think my parents were too, but something my dad told me, and the way you were talking about, your mom teaching you reminded me of this. But I remember one day he said, I can teach you a lot of things about a lot of different subjects. And then he paused for a second and he said, but money's something I've never learned. So if you ever want to learn how to get rich, go find somebody else to teach you, and I mean, that advice was priceless. It was just one of those things where, at the time, your parents knew everything, right? But anyway, the way you're talking about your mom, it reminded me of that. It was just like, it's one of those things that I've remembered ever since. But
anyway. It seems like they set us on the right path to, go find those people, and it's up to us to kind of push it to the next level. So
yeah, absolutely. So, well, cool. Well, hey, Paul, we got Drew on the line. What do you want to ask him?
Yeah, sure. So I heard you talk about loan assumptions, in your chat, and I was just curious, like, where do newbie multifamily investors kind of draw some incorrect conclusions about loan assumptions? Like, where do they typically make mistakes in underwriting for that stuff?
Well, that's a good question. I'd say, so you're picking up someone else's loan. So it's a little harder to underwrite because odds are they're already somewhere into their principal and interest schedule. So you're not just starting at like payment one and they'll say a 30-year payment schedule. You need to figure out when the maturity date is, what's the balance right now, when they start making their first payments. Then you can model it out by seeing where you are in the amortization schedule. So easiest way to do that is just ask for the loan note, because you can ask the broker these questions one by one. But it's just faster to ask. You can get a copy of it. Otherwise, you're going to need to ask the start date, how much interest only was there, the interest rate, the initial principal balance, the maturity date, all these things. Depending on who the lender is, that's a tough way to start on maybe someone's first multifamily deal. Most of the loans that probably people would be looking at assuming would be done through Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. And I don't know the exact guidelines and what they're looking for on a first-time borrower with them. You would need to own multiple deals already in that market for a certain amount of time. So if, let's say, it's someone's first deal in a market, or they just bought one recently, they'll have a hard time getting it approved. So I think if you're brand new, I would partner up with someone who's done a few already, and then you just be relying on their resume to get it approved.
And that is something lenders, they don't want to move up in risk level when they're doing the assumption, right? So the buyer team has to be on the same level or above where the previous owners are, right? So that's one thing that's in there. I mean, Drew hit a lot of really good points. The other thing is the fee structure can be different depending on, who the lender is. We're doing an assumption with a life insurance company loan. And one thing really nice about that one is we don't have to pay any fees or redo any of the third-party reports. So, I mean, yeah, really, I think the answer is, when you're looking at something like that, ask a lot of questions, and like Drew said, get a copy of the note, get a copy of the amortization schedule, something like that. And that's going to make it a lot easier to look at. But yeah, timing, you never know exactly when you're going to close. So it is a little difficult.
Got it. Thank you. Yeah. I also wanted to pivot. One thing I'm still struggling with a lot is deal flow. I just wondered, Drew, if you had any advice on how to sort of strengthen your relationships with brokers such that they trust you more. What are some things I can do to get better deals?
The deal that you bought that you said had the Section 8 tenants in it, that was a single family house, or
yes.
You are looking to pivot to multifamily now?
Yes, correct.
I think the best way to do it is to just be open about what you're exactly doing, communicate it clearly to the brokers. Because let's say once you've done one or two deals, then my strategy would be different. And I'll get to that too for people that are in that spot. But a lot of times when people are starting out, they try to put up a facade or like puff like I'm like bigger than I am. Like, don't do the opposite of that. Just tell them exactly what you're doing. I bought a rental house and I'm trying to move to this type of property. And if they ask, where's your debt coming from or equity, like just tell them the real answer, and then at least it's not like a opaque black box. They don't understand. They call you and they're like, I don't really understand what he's up to. Yeah. And I'm not saying you're doing this. I'm just saying I hear this other times from people where I'll ask them even what they're doing, and I don't really understand fully like exactly the strategy. And then if they talk to brokers that way, then I'm like, it'd be harder to know what to send them. And I kind of would be almost in a way skeptical if they can get it closed, because I don't know what they're doing for debt or equity or what their business plan exactly is even. And then once you've bought one or two deals, now you're kind of a known quantity. And what's funny is that it'll flip where now people will be calling you with deals and you're like a known buyer. And then you can just rely on that. And so when you talk to a broker and say, yeah, but I bought this 4-unit or this 8-unit or whatever size deal nearby, or it was similar, that'll be the way I'd do it. And then once you've done, a few deals, then you're on everybody's list, you're getting the deals.
Yeah. One thing I did up front is I used to pay attention to what brokers asked. And it probably took me a couple of phone calls to realize that they were sizing me up on the first phone call. Probably way too many, but I got to the point where I started realizing that first phone call, they're sizing you up. But I 100% agree with what Drew's saying. Don't try to puff yourself up and make yourself look better. I love the idea of transparency. But what I started doing is every time I got a question that I couldn't answer, I'd write it down and I would go figure out the answer, And so along the way, I got much better and better and better at these calls, and it wasn't just finding the answer. Sometimes it was, do you have a key principle? I remember somebody asking me that question. I'm just like, I don't even know what that is. They explained what it is. I'm like, oh, so I need somebody on my team that can guarantee a loan. Okay. So that's how I did it. But, end of the day, I think what I would say is just kind of, you have to know what it takes to buy an apartment building. All right. And money is the answer. Okay. You've got to be able to qualify for debt. You got to be able to bring the equity in. Okay. And everything else in buying apartment buildings is secondary to that. So those are the two biggest questions you have to answer. And so you have to know what it takes to buy an apartment building and then do everything you can to prepare yourself, get yourself able to actually buy it. And that's going to give you the most traction quickest.
Okay. Got it.
And to build on Brian's example with the key principle thing, when I was in the similar situation and someone asked me something that I don't know what that means or what's the answer, like I would I've only in my whole life asked them then, like, how does that work, or what is this?
Mm-hmm.
Where I feel like, and I just did that naturally, but then when I saw people that wouldn't ask and they'd kind of dance around it, that's where this kind of confusion comes up I'm talking about, where then if Brian's like, I'm going to look into that, I'll write it down, I'm not really sure what that is, or he asked the broker, like, that's a good answer. Where if he's tried to answer without knowing what it is, that's a good example of like, this broker's confused and thinks he's kind of not serious now because I asked a question and he acted like he knew what key principle meant, but he told me some answer that made no sense. So like, I think that's important too, when you don't need to pretend you know things you don't, like, it's just really kind of hard to navigate when you're starting out, but that's important.
Okay, got it. Okay, so I have another question. One of the things that I see myself as an analytical person is like underwriting deals, right? And of course, I think most people gravitate towards that when they're first starting out. And I'm just curious how I can become a better underwriter. Like, can I look at someone else's deal as a case study? Should I be researching a certain information? How can I learn how to underwrite a bigger deal such that I can gain, increase my skill?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because I think, well, at this point, what's the largest deal that you've underwrote, would you say?
Probably 85 units.
Mm-hmm. Okay, nice. And how did you do that? You made a model in Excel, or you were able to download one, or?
I have a model that I use from a paid group that I'm in.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have all the tools then that you need, and you just need more practice now. Mm-hmm. So you're on these broker lists, and I would underwrite the deals. If an 85 unit's too large to close on now, and you're just getting reps, just download the information on your own. I wouldn't reach out to the broker unless it's something you think you could do or would work out. Because when you're starting out, you also don't want to be like chewing up a lot of their time. But I would just keep getting reps underwriting deals. You have, it sounds like a model that works if that group's using it, and then don't reinvent the wheel. I think I ended up, when we first started, made my own model, but it's like, I didn't need to do that. And that didn't really, if anything, then adding things to it over the years made it kind of like an ad hoc thrown together thing. And then at some point we just completely switched models to be able to accommodate bigger deals. But yeah, I would do that. Okay, short answer would have been practice. So that's as simple. Sorry, it's so simple, but just getting more reps, then you'll see more things. And if you underwrite a loan assumption, then you already would have noticed kind of what my tip is on that was like, oh, this is, this one, it's already like 2 years into the loan schedule. I need to adjust for that now. And now, to ask about that. And that's also like a negative of loan assumption deals. Then you kind of just you'll learn a lot just getting those reps.
I would say get on investor lists of people that are doing the large deals. And it is something that's actually helped me. I mean, I've showed up to like these $80 million purchase prices and shown up to the webinars, to learn, and you can see there's lots of different things they can bring in. I mean, when we're doing smaller deals, there's usually, one tranche or one category of debt and one category of equity. But when you get into these larger and larger deals, you start seeing different colors of money, and you see different elements to the capital stack, and that's something that's really helped me. And especially there are some groups that when they do these webinars, they'll do deep dives into their underwriting. You go in there, you can kind of see how they structure deals, because there's lots of different ways to structure things. You can see, okay, now these guys have like a tranche of mezz debt. They have a little bit of preferred equity. They have this, they have that. And, a lot of the buy off the shelf models aren't going to accommodate, a lot of that stuff. So eventually, when you're getting to the bigger and bigger deals, you're going to have to, for most people, create their own. And that's actually what we just did in the last couple of months, is we created our own. We were able to bring in like all these other bells and whistles that a lot of people don't. And oh my goodness, I just looked at the time and we are pretty much out. So one last question for both of you, and Drew, you get to go first. How can listeners learn more about you?
You can find me on pretty much every social media platform at Drew Breneman. Then I have a podcast too. It's a real estate investing podcast, primarily for active investors, but also get into quite a bit of passive investor content too. That's called the Breneman Blueprint. Yep. Then our company's website, Breneman Capital. The website's breneman.com. You can sign up to be on our investor list, check out our portfolio, our blog. We have a passive investing guidebook you can download. There's all sorts of stuff on there. So check it out. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. And that's all going to be in the show notes, the link to the podcast, link to the website. And I think we got links to a lot of his social media stuff as well. So we'll have that. Oh, we got your link tree. So that'll be in there too. So Paul, same question for you. How can listeners learn more about you?
Yeah, so you guys can also find me on LinkedIn, Paul Gomez. You can also follow me on Instagram at paul.buy.sell.invest. I just like to connect with you there. If you're like, a young, hungry individual like me in the Dallas area, I'd love to connect in person. I'm always looking for, driven people like myself to connect with. So yeah, reach out.
Awesome. And we'll have links in the show notes as well. So thanks again, guys, for coming on the show today. Very much appreciate your time.
Thank you guys. I appreciate your advice. Thanks.
Yeah, definitely.
Hey, if you like that episode, make sure to subscribe. But more importantly, if you haven't joined our multifamily educational community yet, which we call a Tribe of Titans, you are missing out. Get 30 days free by clicking the link in the description to this episode, or go to thetribeoftitans.info, and we'll see you there.